What has a point guard, a shooting guard, a small forward, a power forward, two centers, and like 8 other guys? It's not an NBA team because they don't bother with positions anymore. It's your fantasy basketball lineup. And really, it's time to ask ourselves, why are we messing around with positions at all? So, prior to COVID-19 basically ruining any and everything in its path, I wanted to improve my fantasy basketball team, which is not doing so good. Anyway, I was scouring the waiver wire, seeing if there were any solid pickups that would maybe boost me in a few roto categories. And it sort of hit me scrolling through all of these players that positions don't matter. Either players are listed to play basically every position, or they just do a little bit of everything anyway, meaning there's no advantage of picking up someone because they aren't going to contribute since everyone else is contributing in that category anyway. You probably don't believe me, and that's okay, but I want to break this down a little more. So I found 4 players in the top 75 of Yahoo's rankings right now, and they play different positions, but you couldn't tell them you couldn't tell what position they played based on their stats. It's pretty much impossible. So why don't we check out these 4 mystery players and see why positions don't mean anything? As you can see on the screen, when it comes to rebounds, assists, and three-pointers made, there's very little discrepancy. The 78 three-pointers made under player B is a bit of an outlier, but when you take a look at this, you really can't say, oh hey, that's a center, oh hey, that's a point guard. They all sort of blend together. Now, when we expand upon this and we look at steals, blocks, and free throw percentage, it's much the same thing. They obviously, player D has a lot of steals and not so many blocks. But again, they all just sort of blend together. Nothing says, oh hey, that is a for sure wing and this guy is a for sure center or power forward. It's hard to tell. And this is what gets to the core of the argument here is, why are we messing with positions if we can't tell anyone in what position they play to begin with? Now, there's a few things I want to point out here. You're probably wondering about. All of these guys roughly have the same number of games played. There's obviously a few games more for some players than others. Also, in terms of minutes per game, only player C played noticeably less minutes per game, and even then, he averaged around 28, 29 a game, and everyone else was up above 32, 33. Even though you look at the stats, though, and we used raw number stats just as it applies to fantasy basketball, there's not a whole lot difference between player A, player B, player C, and player D. Of course, you probably want to know, who are these players? What position do they play? So, let's find out. Player A. Allow me to introduce Philadelphia 76er power forward, stretch 4, occasional oversized 3, Tobias Harris. Yeah, you can sort of see he does a lot of everything. That also is a bit unique to Philadelphia and the way they sort of run that team. But you can't really say that he looks like a power forward or he looks like a 3 or a 2. He just sort of is a guy who does a little bit of everything and could probably be classified as any position on the court, and you wouldn't really know any better. Player B is Oklahoma City Thunder something. I don't even know what position he's classified as anymore. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Here's something interesting. Yahoo now categorizes SGA as a point guard, a shooting guard, and a small forward. So pretty much you can slot him anywhere in the lineup as is. So why are we messing around with positions if this guy can play all but center and power forward? And then you look at his numbers, and he had by far and away the most blocks out of anyone on this list, despite being a guard by and large, and also being an awful three-point shooter. I mean, really, of all the players, you probably would have said player B is a center just based on those stats, and yet he was actually a guard. Moving on to Player C. Player C is actually a true-to-form big man. Sacramento Kings power forward and also occasional center Nemanja Bjelica. Bjelica kind of looks like a wing, all things considered. He's a three-point shooter. He's a little bit of a playmaker, but technically, for fantasy basketball purposes, he's a power forward. Yahoo doesn't even list him as a center yet, despite playing some minutes in Sacramento as a center. And yeah, I mean, why are we saying that this guy who has all of these three-pointers made and a significant number of assists has to be listed in one specific category? In Player D is Will Barton of the Denver Nuggets, a traditional wing if there ever was one. And then you look at his numbers and it doesn't scream out at you wing player. I mean, he had the most assists on the list. He had a great deal of steals. You may even think that, heck, this guy could be a point guard maybe, but he's not. He's a shooting guard and a small forward, but really, let's just get rid of these positions altogether. And that's the main point here. If teams don't care about player positions in player usage, why are we caring about them in fantasy basketball? Listen, let me draft my 12 centers and be done with it. No one really likes playing fantasy basketball to begin with. It's just sort of something that's there after football season. Open it up, make it fun, and let me do whatever the hell I want. And that is it for today. I'm Cheyenne Hollis with the Touchback, and remember, as always, take it out to the 25.